Welcome back for a new special top 10 list, and this is going to be TCG related. We are going to be looking at, in my personal opinion, 10 of my all-time favorite rares from the set known as Worldwake, which is my number one favorite Magic set of all time. So with that said, let's check out, for me personally, what are my personal top 10 favorite rares, well, rare slash mythical, from Worldwake. And in the future sometime, if you're interested, I might do one looking at a combination of favorite commons and uncommons, as well as look at favorite rares from other sets, such as Original Zendikar, Rise of Eldrazi, and others. But with that said, first coming in at number 10. Coming at number 10 is a card that played a key role in my very first ever deck, or I should say my very first Goblin deck. One of the key things that's good about it is the fact it is only 2 mana to use, but what's real big is the ability. Target player gains control of target artifact, creature, or land you control. So, yeah, it can be definitely useful and definitely a tight spot, that's for sure. So with that said, let's check out next. And we're back. I want to readjust the camera. So with that said, coming in next is one of my personal favorite vampires from the set. Of course, has flying. Also, another creature you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield. Each opponent sacrifices a creature. That is a little costly at 7 mana, but I will say about this is at least it's a 5/4, but I think the ability also helps. It definitely can be quite useful in vampire decks, especially specifically of this time frame. Coming in next at number 8. A pretty cool little mythical. Dragon Master Outcast. Costs only 1 mana to bring out, plus it's a 1/1. That may not seem impressive, but its ability makes up for it. In fact, it only costs 1 mana to put out is crazy. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 6 or more lands, put a 5/5 dragon creature token with flying onto the battlefield. That's quite good. Yeah, you have to have, of course, at least 6 or more lands, but the fact it only costs 1 to put onto the field, and then you can create a 5/5 dragon token, that's one of the reasons for a time there, this was a very sought after card from Worldwake set, because of the ability and what little mana actually costs to put out, being only a 1. Yeah, modern day it may be not as impressive, but for the time, this was a huge deal, and yeah, this was a card I loved in an old red deck I used to use. Coming in next, at number 7. The first of 2 artifacts on this list. This only costs 1 mana to bring out. Yeah, it costs 2 mana to equip, but however, equipped creature gains Death Touch and Lifelink. This was a card I loved using specifically in my old vampire deck. This card is insanely good in vampire decks. I mean, the fact you get both Death Touch and Lifelink and only costs 1 to bring out and 2 to equip, I think the cost more than justifies what it gives you ability-wise, which is why this still remains to stay being one of my personal favorite artifacts of all time. Next up, coming in at number 6. This is a card that held a heavy amount of nostalgia for me personally. Death Shadow. It's a very useful card to bring out if you're down to your last few life. And the fact it only costs 1 mana to bring out, though keep in mind its ability, it's a 13/13, but that's why you want to wait until like you're in the single digits before bringing this card out. It can be quite useful though. Death Shadow gets -X, -X, where the X is your life total. So say you're down to your last maybe 6 life points, you bring this out for 1 mana. Even with the deduction, you're still going to have a creature of like 7/7 if you're down your like last 6. So yeah, this can be quite useful. I mean, given how strong it can be in your last few life points, this is definitely a very good. Unfortunately, it's really only good in things like standard, as well as maybe vintage, and areas like that. This card is basically worthless in Commander. But keep in mind, I've mostly only played either Pauper or Standard/Modern. Though recently I have checked out a little bit of Vintage and Pioneer, which is interesting. Coming in at number 5. The Last of the Vampires. Like I've said, vampires are my favorite type of creature in Magic. This card was the most recent card I pulled out of a booster pack. Back last year, actually, I got this card. It is legit an awesome vampire. And whenever, basically, whether this vampire or another vampire you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, if you pay 1 swamp, basically if you do, target player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So that is definitely nice also in a tight spot. Just like Death Shadow is quite useful. Now with that said, we're now in the top 4. Coming in at 4 is probably my favorite artifact from this set specifically. Amulet of Vigor. It is quite good. It only costs 1 mana to bring out. Whenever a permanent enters the battlefield tapped and under your control, untap it. That is very useful in definitely certain types of circumstances. The fact that it immediately gives you the ability to untap, which is one of the reasons why to this day this remains probably one of the most sought after cards, definitely in Worldwake as a whole. There's a reason it's been banned in multiple formats. It is a very useful, very good artifact, and there's a reason why it still holds its value, very much so. Because of the fact it only costs 1 mana to bring out to use. So yeah, it is very good in tight spots, but I specifically really liked having this in my old life gain Angel deck. This was quite useful in. Coming in at number 3, it's definitely going to give nightmares to some people. For me, coming in 3rd place, 3rd favorite card in Worldwake, Jace the Mind Sculptor, which of course only in more recent time has been unbanned in formats. But this remains arguably in modern due to some of the more recent era planeswalkers. It's not as good as it once was, but still, if you know how to use it and play it with other specific cards, it is still a very powerful and still one of the best planeswalkers. And to me, this is probably the most, in my personal opinion, the most iconic Jace card of all time, and still for me, probably the most iconic planeswalker for me personally, because of the heavy nostalgia involved in the fact it's from my favorite set. But yeah, I mean, basically, come out, costs 4 to bring out, you have 3 points to begin, you get +2, look at the top card of target player's library, you may put that card on the bottom of that player's library. For 0, draw 3 cards, then put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order, similar to certain Yu-Gi-Oh cards, funny enough. -1 point, return target creature to its owner's hand. -12, exile all cards from target player's library, then that player shuffles his or her hand into his or her library. So yeah, it's an absurdly very good card in certain circumstances, especially in a blue artifact mill deck, is where this really shines. With that said, coming in at number 2 favorite card from the set is arguably my favorite Angel of all time. This was always the main featured card in, of course, my different life gain decks over the years. Costs 6 mana to bring out. It's a 6/6 plus with flying, but it also has the great landfall ability, which I miss. Just like Kicker, I miss specifically the landfall more than anything. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may exile target non-land permanent other than, of course, the Angel card. When this card leaves the battlefield, return all cards exiled with it to the battlefield under their owner's control. So it's definitely interesting. Its landfall ability is what makes this card so good in my opinion. I know in modern Angels, a lot of people don't consider this, but for me, it's a true iconic card. For me, it's the figurehead of Worldwake, but there's only one card that can never be surpassed from Worldwake, and that is arguably the most, in my opinion, most iconic legendary land of all time, the Eye of Ugin. This card remains still top tier to this day. Colorless Eldrazi spells you cast, 2 less to cast. So that is quite useful. Basically, Eldrazi like spells you want to use, or of course also eventually also any Eldrazi cards basically in general cost 2 less. That's what makes this card so good. Keep in mind, Worldwake came out before Rise of Eldrazi, but it was setting the stage for the Eldrazi, which at the time you did not know what Eldrazi was when Worldwake came out. Also, this was basically also opening up things for the future for a future Planeswalker, Ugin. But Eye of Ugin remains, in my opinion, the most iconic land, definitely of the 2010s, easily. And also the fact if you pay 7 mana, tap, search your library for a colorless creature card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. So basically, you can use this in any sort of like Eldrazi deck you want, but keep in mind, Eye of Ugin is basically banned from so many formats, it's crazy, because of how powerful its ability is, specifically with colorless type creatures like a lot of the Eldrazi or the Mirrors, which at one time I did use Eye of Ugin in an old Mirror deck. With that said, that is my top 10 favorite rares from the set Worldwake. And with that, with the last scene here in the video, just show my top 3 favorite cards from the set. With that said, hopefully you enjoyed this top 10. Let me know if you'd like me to do another one of these in the future. I love talking about these specific sets from the early 2010s. When I first got into Magic, I have a lot of nostalgia and love for these sets. Music in the background today, by the way, is from Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance. So with that said, I'll see y'all again next time. Stay safe out there.